The morning sunlight spilled across my kitchen, catching the edge of my silk blouse. I sipped my coffee slowly, the warmth grounding me against the tremor of memories I tried so hard to push away. The house was quiet, but the silence was fragile, like it could shatter at any moment. My phone buzzed against the marble countertop. A message from an unknown number. "She's asking about you. Your daughter." My heart stuttered. 6 years. 6 years since I last saw her smile without fear in her eyes. 6 years since my husband walked out with nothing but bitterness on his lips. I hadn't just refused to lend my brother's pay. I had refused to let greed and manipulation dictate my family's life. And he'd abandoned not me, but my little girl. I ran a hand through my hair, feeling the silk of my sleeve against my skin. I hated that it still hurt, that I still wondered if I could have done something differently. But part of me also knew I'd grown stronger, built a life from nothing, hidden from those who underestimated me. The sound of the phone vibrating again snapped me back. My pulse quickened, not just from fear, but anticipation. I was about to confront the ghosts of a past that had tried to define me. This was the moment I realized that some truths, no matter how painful, were worth facing. I remember that night like it was yesterday, though my younger self was trembling and terrified. The apartment was small, cluttered with reminders of life before everything fell apart. My husband, Jason, was pacing the living room, his hands clenched around his phone like it was a weapon. My brother, Dylan, had called earlier, asking for a loan, one he swore he'd pay back next week. I had hesitated. Not because I didn't want to help him, but because it would have risked everything we had, everything I had worked for in those early years. "Madeline, it's just a few thousand. You're so selfish." Jason snapped, his face shadowed in anger. "If you loved me, you'd say yes." I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. My hands shook as I held the stack of paychecks, my fingers gripping them like a lifeline. "Jason, I can't. It's Dylan's responsibility. And we can't. Don't give me that." He slammed his hand on the counter, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "I can't believe you'd put money over family, over me, over her." His voice cracked, and for a second I thought maybe he was just scared. But then I saw it, the cruel gleam in his eyes that said my refusal wasn't just a disappointment, it was a betrayal. I felt my daughter, Lily, asleep in the next room, and my chest tightened. I couldn't let her see this. I couldn't let her grow up thinking fear and manipulation were love. My mother's words came back to me, like a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You have to stand firm, Madeline. Not everyone will understand, but that doesn't mean you're wrong. Teach your daughter how to choose strength over convenience." It was a small silver charm my grandmother had given me, engraved with a single word: courage. I held it tight that night as Jason stormed out, dragging his own pride behind him. I remember the door slamming and the hollow silence that followed. The air smelled faintly of coffee and dust, but it felt heavier than anything I'd ever known. I sank to the floor, cradling Lily in my arms, promising her I'd protect her no matter what. That night, I made a silent vow to myself. I would not crumble. I would not beg. And I would build a life where we could thrive, even if he never returned. The months after Jason left were the hardest I've ever faced. Nights blurred into mornings as I juggled Lily's needs with finding work that could actually sustain us. I remember sitting at my tiny kitchen table, the silver charm from my grandmother clutched in one hand, a pen in the other, scribbling budgets, ideas, and dreams that felt impossibly out of reach. I took a job at a small marketing firm, barely above minimum wage, but it was a foothold. Every day, I learned something new: how to pitch clients, how to stay calm when everything felt like it was falling apart, how to convince others to see your worth when even you doubted yourself. I met a woman named Claudia, a seasoned executive, who noticed the fire behind my quiet determination. "You have potential, Madeline," she said one afternoon, sliding a cup of coffee across the polished desk. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Build your future with your own hands." Her words stayed with me. I began taking freelance projects at night, learning how to design campaigns, negotiate contracts, and manage finances. Lily would fall asleep in the corner, her small hand clutching my sleeve, and I would whisper promises of a life we could control. Those nights were exhausting, often lonely, but every small win, the first successful client, the first profitable contract, was a step toward reclaiming the life I had almost lost. I learned to hide the growth from my family. Jason couldn't know, and Dylan didn't need to. My social media posts were modest, almost empty of the success we were quietly building. I wanted to protect myself from their judgments, from the expectation that I would bend or beg. Months turned into years. Lily grew confident and bright, flourishing in the space I created for her. I built a boutique digital marketing agency from scratch, learning every skill I needed along the way. I celebrated quietly. Our first office lease, our first major client, our first profit that wasn't just survival, it was victory. Through it all, I carried the silver charm around my neck, the word courage pressed against my chest. It reminded me that even in fear, we can build something extraordinary if we refuse to surrender to those who try to define our worth. By the time the opportunity came to finally confront my past, I wasn't the scared, uncertain woman who had cradled Lily 6 years ago. I was confident, accomplished, and unapologetically in control of my life. I had built a world where fear didn't rule us, and now it was time to see how those who abandoned us would respond to the truth. The day they arrived, my office smelled faintly of fresh linen and coffee, a comforting contrast to the storm I knew was coming. Jason had called earlier, tentative, pretending it was curiosity that brought him back into our lives. He said nothing about the years of absence, nothing about Lily. Dylan, as expected, was cocky and casual, but the air between them felt brittle. I greeted them with a calm smile, letting them take in the space before I spoke. The office was nothing like the cramped apartment of our past. Expensive art adorned the walls, and the polished mahogany desk gleamed under the natural light. I motioned toward the panoramic windows that framed the city skyline. Lily sat quietly beside me, her small hand clutching mine, a silent reminder of the life we had built. Jason's eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place. Was it hope, guilt, or disbelief? Dylan didn't hide his smirk, but I saw it falter the second he noticed the framed certificate of our agency's recognition on the wall. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch. I could almost feel the weight of the years pressing against them, and I let it. I waited until the tension reached its peak. Then I spoke. "I'm Madeline Hayes," I began, my voice steady, unwavering. "Owner of Hayes Digital Marketing. Net worth, more than either of you expected. And yes, this is the life I built while you were gone." Jason's mouth opened, then closed. Dylan's smirk cracked into something less confident. Their eyes roamed the office, taking in the evidence, awards, contracts, photos of clients, and Lily smiling confidently, thriving in the environment I had created. "You left," I continued, my tone soft but edged with steel. "You abandoned your daughter because I refused to bend to your greed. And yet here we are. I didn't just survive. I built a life worth more than your assumptions could ever predict." Lily's small hand tightened around mine. I wanted them to see her, not as a pawn in their arguments, but as a testament to resilience. "This little girl," I said, glancing at Lily, "is everything I fought for, everything I protected, and everything you walked away from." Jason swallowed hard. His eyes were glossy, the weight of shame settling in. Dylan shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware that his arrogance had met its match. I could almost see the realization dawn, that their absence had cost them respect, that our life didn't need their validation. I let the silence hang again, letting the magnitude of my success, of our survival, sink in. They had expected weakness, hesitation, perhaps even regret. Instead, they were confronted with confidence, empowerment, and undeniable achievement. For the first time, I watched them struggle, not because I wanted to punish them, but because I wanted them to understand the consequences of their choices. We had endured, we had thrived, and we had done it without their support, without their respect, and without their involvement. I looked at Jason and Dylan, letting the weight of the room settle. For years, they had assumed they held the power, that I was weak, dependent, and manipulable. But the truth was unmistakable. The power had shifted. And now it wasn't about revenge. It was about boundaries, accountability, and growth. "Here's what will happen," I began, my voice steady, calm, but carrying the authority I had earned. "If you want to be part of Lily's life, or any part of mine, you will do so on my terms." Jason's eyes widened, a flicker of fear passing through them. Dylan leaned back, skeptical but attentive. I continued, "First, you both need to acknowledge the damage caused, not just to me but to Lily. Apologies aren't enough if they're empty. Actions speak louder than words." Jason swallowed. I could see him grappling with his pride, but I didn't soften. "Second, respect is non-negotiable. There will be no manipulation, no ultimatums, no selfish decisions at her expense. Lily's well-being comes first, always." I paused, letting each word sink in. My chest tightened, but I didn't flinch. "Third, Dylan, you must take responsibility for your actions. That includes paying back what you owe and understanding that I will no longer be your financial safety net. You are capable. Use that capability instead of expecting others to fix your mistakes." I glanced at Lily, whose eyes were bright with curiosity and pride. She had learned to trust herself and me, and this moment was also hers. "Finally," I said, my voice softening slightly, "I will help you only if you commit to personal growth. Seek balance, pursue your dreams, and learn from the choices that hurt others. This is not about punishment, it's about transformation." Jason shifted uncomfortably. Dylan's face, usually so confident, was pale. I saw recognition, the first hints that they understood life doesn't bend to entitlement. "I care about you both," I said, "but I will not allow toxic patterns to re-enter our lives. You have a choice: embrace change or step aside." For a moment, the room was silent except for Lily's quiet breathing. I watched Jason's jaw tighten, saw Dylan swallow nervously. They were confronting reality. The life they had abandoned had flourished, the daughter they left behind had grown into someone strong, and the woman they underestimated had become untouchable. I realized something then: power wasn't about fear. It wasn't about showing them who had won. It was about reclaiming control, setting boundaries, and offering a path for those who were willing to grow. In that moment, I understood that empowerment wasn't just survival. It was compassion paired with firmness. It was love for my child balanced with unwavering self-respect. And it was finally my turn to decide who deserved a place in our lives, and under what conditions. Weeks passed after that confrontation, and slowly, I watched changes take root. Jason sought therapy and began to confront his own patterns of selfishness. Dylan, reluctantly at first, started taking accountability for his life choices, repaying debts, and seeking growth instead of shortcuts. It wasn't instant, and it wasn't perfect, but it was real. Lily thrived, of course. She blossomed in the space I had created for her, a space built on trust, strength, and independence. She asked fewer questions about the past, instead reveling in the present, confident in the knowledge that her mother had protected and fought for her. Some nights, I would sit in the living room, the silver charm from my grandmother resting against my chest, and reflect on the journey. I thought about the younger me, the woman who trembled with fear yet refused to bend. I remembered cradling Lily, feeling the sting of abandonment, the ache of being underestimated. And I realized how far we had come, how pain had been transformed into determination, and vulnerability had been honed into resilience. I could see now that the hardest chapters had forged the strongest parts of me. The woman who had built a life from scratch was not the same woman who had feared rejection. I had learned that strength was not just surviving, it was thriving, even when no one else believed in you. The silver charm glinted in the morning light, a symbol of courage and endurance. I touched it gently, whispering a silent thanks to my grandmother, to myself, and to the life we had fought for. It reminded me that every struggle had its purpose, and every act of refusal, every boundary set, had led us here, stronger, independent, and whole. Looking at Lily's bright eyes, I smiled. "We did it, kiddo," I whispered. And in that moment, I understood something fundamental. Life was not about waiting for others to return. It was about building a world where we could thrive regardless. I leaned back in my chair, letting the sunlight wash over me. The past was behind us, the future ours to shape. And finally, I spoke the truth that had guided me all these years. I am not defined by those who left. I am defined by the life I chose, the love I nurtured, and the courage I carry every single day.